Hello again, everybody. Welcome to another stud story. And today's Christmas Day. And I just happen to have a Christmas story for you. And I'd like to start this one off, a little bit of history about my dad. And we're going to go way back to probably the 40s, the 50s. Start this out about the type of guy my dad was. A lot of you out there, especially you younger people, probably don't know much about hitchhikers. And back in the day, in the 30s and the 40s and the 50s, a lot of poor people didn't have cars. And this deal right here, the old thumb out, and somebody driving by, there was a whole lot of people on the highways across America, and you gave them a ride when you could. Some people did. Some people never picked anybody up. But my dad was an extremely generous guy and a really nice person, basically. And so I never knew in the morning sometimes when I got up, me and my brother, and went in to eat breakfast, who was going to be sitting at the table. Because not only did he pick them up, he'd bring them home and he would put them in bed. He would give them a bedroom to sleep in. And the next morning, he'd get them up, have breakfast with us. And it wasn't uncommon for him to put them back in the car and take them to the highway where they could ride again. And I have seen him leave with a nice jacket on and come home without it. He'd give them a coat if they needed it. He'd give them, and I know he always gave them some money. So, and I tell you this because the story is going to be based upon that in a respect of he was a very generous person, and so growing up like every other kid, had great Christmases. Some of you remember more than others, but probably the best Christmas my brother and I ever had. My dad, we traveled around the country, living in all types of different cities: Mobile, Alabama, Memphis, Tennessee, Tucson, Arizona, Phoenix, Arizona, Denver, Colorado. We just here, there, and everywhere because we were a wrestling family. And so in 1963, we lived in a little town about 60 miles outside of Memphis, Potts Camp, Mississippi. Really small little town. And my dad had been in wrestling for quite a few years, had tremendous success just before we moved there in Memphis. Basically had his town and territory stolen from him by the Athletic Commission. And we moved, he wanted to try farming. He had saved some money. Memphis had just been a tremendous territory. He'd done very, very well. And he bought a 2,000-acre farm. In Mississippi, not too far off the Mississippi River. So it was tremendous farmland. And it was an old farm. It had been owned by no telling how many different people, but it had about 5 houses on that farm that were sharecropper homes. And for those people that don't know what a sharecropper was, is back in the South, way back in the old days, almost back to Civil War time, and especially after the Civil War, these big farms were there. They didn't have anybody to farm them anymore. And they would let people live in those small houses. And then that person would grow their own crops, and then they would share that crop with the owner of the land at the end of whatever the season was, whatever the crop was. Anyway, in 1963, Potts Camp, Mississippi, we lived on this 2,000-acre farm, and there had 5 houses on this farm that were people that had been, for years and years, had been sharecroppers' home, but they didn't sharecrop anymore. They weren't farmers. A couple of them were very old. One couple in particular was extremely old, and those people back in the woods is where it was. This farm, Potts Camp, Mississippi. You can imagine that the town was probably only 300 people or whatever, and we lived 7 miles outside that town. So we were really out in the country, in the middle of nowhere. We had those 5 houses, and none of those people in those houses were farming, and Dad didn't even charge them rent. he just really, just felt like that they were rock bottom and couldn't afford anything, and he didn't expect them to go and farm the land and share the crops with him, any of that stuff. So I remember the Christmas in 1963, he set us down, me and Rob, at the table, and we had a conversation, and he says, it's Christmas time, and he says, we can, as usual, I could get you whatever you might want for Christmas. And he goes, but I have an idea. He says, I'd like to suggest something, and you guys tell me what you want to do. He said, I'd like to suggest that this Christmas that we buy presents for all these 5 families that live on our farm. And he says, you won't get nothing. I'm not going to buy you anything, but I want to see what you guys think about it. And obviously, that's a pretty good thought. He's really thinking right, and and it kind of struck me and Rob both that we went right along and said, Dad, that's a great idea. So we bought all kinds of little things, and a lot of it was very necessary items for those people that didn't have them. Some of it was nice stuff, stove. A lot of them had wood stove, and he bought them, real stove, and nice things, and it was in delivering that stuff on Christmas Day to those 5 families and those 5 homes, and some of them didn't even have automobiles. One kid that lived there, he lived with his grandmother and his grandfather, and he had never ridden in a car in 1963. It's hard to believe that, but that's the truth, So, they were very backwoods, and they didn't have much. But wow, it was just, it was an unbelievable gesture, and what was really great is we went with him. Me and Dad and my mother went too, and Rob, and we actually took those presents into those people's homes, carried the stoves in, whatever it was that he had gotten for them, and wow, it was a phenomenal Christmas, the greatest by far that I ever had. Rob, if he was here, would tell you the same thing. It was really gratifying to just see the faces of those people, and a little bit different story, but it's Christmas, and it's a great day to tell it, and it's a great time for all of us out there. So many of us have a lot more than what others do, and we just sometimes Christmas, that is really, to me, the spirit of Christmas, and that's what happened in 1963, and I hope you've enjoyed it. A little short one today, but thank you all very much, and and everybody out there, have a very Merry Christmas, and I look forward to the next story.